They did not call me unmarriageable to my face at first. That word traveled quietly through drawing rooms and church pews, whispered behind fans, and folded into polite smiles. At first, I heard it only in fragments, half sentences that stopped when I entered the room, glances that lingered just long enough to make me feel something was wrong with me that I could not see. I told myself I was imagining it, that people were simply uncomfortable around illness, around difference. But by the time the 12th proposal was withdrawn, the word no longer needed to be spoken aloud. It lived inside me. My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I was born in Virginia in the year 1834, into a house that believed reputation mattered more than truth and appearances mattered more than happiness. The Whitmore estate sat on a gentle rise of land, its white columns visible long before one reached the gates. From the outside, it was a symbol of Southern success: acres of tobacco fields, dozens of enslaved workers, polished floors that reflected candlelight like water. Inside, it was quieter, lonelier. My mother died 3 days after giving birth to me. I was told this fact so often that it became part of my identity, as if my very existence had cost too much. My father never remarried. Colonel Richard Whitmore was not an unkind man, but he was a man shaped by his time. He believed in order, hierarchy, and control. Love, to him, was something expressed through provision, not tenderness. He provided me with everything money could buy: tutors, books, fine clothing, safety. What he did not provide, I learned to live without. I was raised like a son in many ways. While other girls practiced embroidery, I learned estate accounting. While they memorized etiquette, I read Greek philosophers and Roman historians. My father said knowledge was protection. I believed him. For many years, I believed knowledge could protect me from anything. Then, when I was 8 years old, I asked to ride one of the horses alone. The horse was young and easily startled. I had ridden before, supervised, but that afternoon I wanted freedom, just once. The sky was wide and blue, the fields endless. When the horse reared at the sudden movement of a snake in the grass, I remember the world tilting, the air leaving my lungs, and then a sound that did not belong to nature. A sharp cracking sound that came from inside my own body. Pain followed later. At first there was only shock. Doctors came. Serious men with heavy bags and heavier expressions. They spoke in careful tones, as if softness might change reality. My father stood straight-backed and silent as they explained what I already sensed. My spine had been damaged. I would live, they said, but I would never walk normally again. That word, never, became the second defining word of my life. My father reacted the only way he knew how. He fought reality with money. He brought doctors from distant cities. He commissioned a wheelchair made of polished mahogany, padded in leather softer than any chair in the house. He altered the estate itself, as if reshaping buildings could undo what had happened to my body. Ramps were installed. Doorways widened. My bedroom moved to the ground floor. But Virginia society was not so easily remodeled. At first, people came to visit. They expressed sympathy, brought flowers, spoke of God's will. Then they came less often. Then not at all. By the time I reached adolescence, invitations stopped entirely. Girls my age learned to dance. I learned to sit still and smile. They learned how to attract attention. I learned how to disappear. My education continued, but it felt increasingly theoretical. What use was knowledge, I wondered, if the world had already decided where I belonged? By 16, I understood something no tutor would ever teach me. A woman's worth in Virginia was measured by her ability to fulfill a role. Wife, hostess, mother. A body that could not perform these functions was considered unfinished. At 18, my father began arranging proposals. He did not ask me if I wanted to marry. He asked me if I understood the necessity. I told him I did not need a husband to survive. I could manage accounts. I could oversee operations. I had done so already in his absence. He listened patiently, then shook his head. "You are thinking like a man," he said. "The world will not treat you like one." The first suitor was kind enough. He spoke to me respectfully, asked about my studies, avoided looking at my chair. When he declined, he sent a letter apologizing for circumstances beyond his control. The second spoke of practicality, the third of appearances. By the fifth, the language grew sharper. By the eighth, it grew cruel. One man laughed as if the idea itself were absurd. Another asked my father privately whether my condition might worsen with age. A third suggested that my presence would make his household uncomfortable. By the 12th rejection, the word emerged fully formed. Unmarriageable. It was not just that I could not walk. It was that my existence reminded people of vulnerability, of dependence, of the fragility they worked so hard to deny. I became something to avoid. I saw the fear settle into my father's face long before he spoke of it. Fear not for his reputation, but for my future. He knew what happened to unmarried women without protectors. He knew the law. When he called me into his study one winter evening, I sensed something had already been decided. He told me he had found another solution. When he said Josiah's name, I thought I had misheard him. Josiah was the enslaved blacksmith, the largest man on the estate. Men joked that he was built like two men stacked together. Women crossed the road when he passed, not because he had ever harmed anyone, but because size itself frightened them. My father explained his reasoning slowly, carefully, as if presenting a business arrangement. Josiah was strong, capable, loyal. He could carry me, protect me, ensure my safety when my father no longer could. He could not abandon me. He would be bound to me. In that moment, something inside me broke and reformed at the same time. I realized that society had stripped both of us of humanity in different ways. I was no longer a woman. He was never allowed to be a man. We were solutions to each other's problems, not people. When I met Josiah properly, not in passing but face to face, I expected fear to consume me. Instead, I felt confusion. He was enormous, yes, but he moved carefully, as if aware that the world had already decided what he was and he dared not confirm it. When he spoke, his voice was low and controlled. He did not look at me directly at first. When I asked him questions, he answered honestly, even when honesty frightened him. When I asked if he could read, his hesitation told me everything. He nodded finally, admitting he had taught himself in secret. Books, he said, made chains feel lighter. That sentence stayed with me long after he left the room. In the weeks that followed, our arrangement began. At first, it was stiff and formal. He helped me dress with his eyes turned away. He carried me only after asking permission. Every movement was careful, deliberate, respectful. He treated my body as something fragile but valuable, not inconvenient. We began talking, then reading, then thinking together. As weeks turned into months, the estate itself seemed to adjust to our presence together. People noticed, of course. They always did. Enslaved workers noticed how Josiah was summoned more often to the main house, how he walked beside me instead of behind me, how my laughter, long absent from the halls, returned in small, cautious bursts. Whispers followed us like shadows, some curious, some disapproving, some openly hostile, but none of them said anything directly, not yet. Life settled into a rhythm I had never known. Mornings began with books. Josiah read aloud while I followed the words with my fingers, feeling language take shape in the air between us. He loved poetry most. Said it felt like freedom that no one could confiscate. In the afternoons, we worked together in the forge. At first, I only watched, fascinated by the way iron changed under heat, how something rigid could become malleable, then strong again in a new form. Eventually, he guided my hands, teaching me how to strike, how to listen to the sound metal made when it was ready to be shaped. Those hours were transformative. My body, which society had declared useless, rediscovered purpose. My arms grew stronger, my back steadier. I learned how to balance myself, how to move with intention rather than shame. Josiah never rushed me, never pitied me. When I struggled, he waited. When I succeeded, he smiled as if it were the most natural thing in the world. In the evenings, we talked. Not about the arrangement, not about the danger, but about life. He told me about his childhood, fragments of memories before he was sold south. A mother's voice he could no longer remember clearly, a riverbank where he once believed the world ended. I told him about my mother, though I barely remembered her myself, and about the life I had imagined before the fall from the horse. We spoke of freedom as if it were an abstract concept, safer that way. Naming it too directly felt like tempting fate. Love did not arrive with drama. It arrived with familiarity, with comfort, with the realization that the silence between us was no longer empty. When he laughed, it felt like sunlight breaking through heavy curtains. When he looked at me, truly looked at me, I felt something loosen inside my chest that I had not known was clenched. The first time he touched my hand without necessity, both of us froze. It was such a small thing, fingers brushing mine as he passed me a book, but it carried the weight of everything forbidden. He pulled back immediately, apologizing. I told him not to. That one word changed everything. Our love unfolded cautiously, aware of the world pressing in from all sides. There were no grand gestures, only stolen moments, a shared glance across a room, a whispered joke, a kiss pressed into my hair when no one was watching. We learned each other's rhythms, each other's fears. I learned that he had spent years mastering self-control because any mistake could cost him his life. He learned that I had spent years believing myself unworthy of desire. Winter deepened, and with it came tension. My father noticed the change in me. I was no longer withdrawn, no longer resigned. I spoke with conviction. I challenged him. I laughed in his presence. One evening, he confronted me directly, asking what was happening between Josiah and me. I did not deny it. For the first time in my life, I refused to shrink. The silence that followed was suffocating. My father's face cycled through emotions I had never seen laid bare. Anger, fear, shame, confusion. He did not shout. That would have been easier. Instead, he paced, hands clasped behind his back, wrestling with truths he had never been forced to face. He told me the dangers, the laws, the consequences. I told him something he had never heard from me before, that I would rather live a short life as myself than a long one as a ghost, that I loved Josiah, that without him protection meant nothing. Days passed with no resolution. Josiah and I continued our routine, but tension hung heavy in the air. He feared being sold south. I feared being separated from the only person who had ever made me feel whole. Then one morning, my father summoned us both. He looked older, smaller, as if the weight of his world had finally settled on his shoulders. He said he had spent his life believing he could control outcomes, that he could arrange safety like furniture. He admitted he had failed me once by believing society's judgment over my own worth. He would not fail me again. What he did next defied everything he had ever stood for. He freed Josiah, not quietly, not conditionally, fully and legally, papers drawn, witnesses present, and then, as if that were not enough, he arranged our marriage in Richmond, where the laws would allow it. He provided money, letters of introduction, and urged us to leave Virginia before anyone could interfere. The night before we left, I walked, or rather maneuvered, through the house I had grown up in. The halls echoed differently now. They felt smaller, less important. My father stood at the door as Josiah loaded our belongings. When he hugged me goodbye, his arms trembled. He whispered that he had wanted to protect me, and in trying to do so, had nearly destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. Our journey north was slow and dangerous. Every mile carried risk, but it also carried possibility. Philadelphia greeted us with noise, movement, anonymity. For the first time, we were not the center of whispered attention. We were simply people. Josiah built a forge with the money my father had given us. I managed the accounts, negotiated contracts, and corresponded with clients. Together, we built a business that thrived. Word spread not of our pasts, but of our work. We were respected, needed. Our home was modest but warm. Books lined the walls. The forge rang with life. Laughter returned louder this time. Children followed, 5 of them. Each birth felt like a small miracle, not because society had doubted my ability to bear them, but because they were born into freedom. We raised them to read, to think, to question. We taught them where they came from without teaching them shame. As years passed, Josiah designed braces to support my legs. Slowly, painstakingly, I learned to stand again, not perfectly, not without effort, but upright. When I took my first steps without assistance, he wept openly. He told me I had never been broken, only unsupported. My father visited us once more before he died. He met his grandchildren. He saw the life we had built. He apologized without excuses. That apology mattered more than I expected. We grew old together. Wrinkles etched our faces, hair silvered, strength faded, but love remained unchanged. When illness finally claimed me, Josiah held my hand until my breathing slowed and stopped. He did not speak, he did not cry, he simply stayed. He followed me one day later. They buried us side by side. 2 names carved into one stone. No titles, no explanations, just dates and a shared life. They once called me unmarriageable. They once called him a brute. But history remembers what society tried to erase. That love does not ask permission. That worth is not granted by bodies or laws. And that sometimes the most radical act is simply choosing to see another human being.